Thanks, Andy, for chatting with me today. Yeah, I guess some of the things I wanted to talk about, well, why I'm coming to you is because there's a lot of experts out there, and there's a lot of opinions, many different opinions about especially the COVID situation in Canada and the world. But not too many people have answers about how to balance the different perspectives. And nobody knows what to do. It seems like fear has taken over and people are acting as sort of in a knee-jerk reaction kind of way. We're either freezing, we're frozen in fear, we don't leave our house, we don't know the balance between managing risk, and I don't know anyone better than to ask you about, the autonomy that individuals have. I guess one of the questions, there's a lot of questions I want to ask you, but I guess one of them was, where do we get our power from? And I think people are feeling powerless right now.
Well, my practice is the Buddhist Taoist, and they both point to the fact of change. So I think, we are afraid of change. We are afraid of change. The COVID caused us to change our daily habits, and that was hard. That was hard and is hard for a lot of people. But you also see change in terms of, especially in the United States or maybe globally, the rise of immigration and the fear of immigration, the fear of black or brown people. But again, that's something. It's all interrelated. Again, as the Buddhists and Taoists would say, everything depends on everything else. So that, but I think the basic is change, and in a way, the Buddha said we suffer because we hold on. Holding on is not necessarily a conscious thing, but like if we have habits, if we have expectations, that is like unconscious holding on. And so when those things seem to be taken away from us, then we get upset, we get fearful, we get angry.
That's right. Yeah, I think, and I've been thinking a lot about Buddha's teachings in these times. That's why I'm here as well, just because I know that if there ever was a time we need to learn or relearn or reinforce Buddha's teachings, Lao Tzu, the Taoist principles, is now. And COVID is testing all of our structures, physical structure, immune system, interpersonal relationships, communities, nations. The world is being tested right now, and I don't see. I mean, we have a lot of medical experts. They're coming from a very scientific, materialist kind of perspective, which is good, and we need to, we gotta, it makes sense to wear a mask in some situations, or using hand sanitizer, washing hands, doing all of our, hygiene. It's important. But at the same time, despite all of the recommendations, people are still suffering on a day-to-day level, and COVID as an idea is maybe creating more suffering for people because they don't understand it. It's confusing. I just want to know, like, what are the things maybe people can do to unify their being so that we can confront this holistically.
Well, I think there are two basic questions which are coming at us from many angles. The political polarization, COVID, global warming. mass immigration, and all of those things are interlinked. So the basic question is, there are two basic challenges. One is that, as I said just now, life is always changing. So if we can, but we're not very good at changing. So, being adept at meditation, and say Taoism, Tai Chi, brings you back into the moment, and so you can have both stillness, but you can have dynamic balance. So it's beginning to accept that the world is changed, life is changed, you are changed. And the other thing which is related to that is that we are not islands unto ourselves. That you're not an island unto yourself, or your clique, your group, your whatever. They're not islands. Everything is interrelated. So that's another question. That's another basic challenge to us. Are we separate, or are we together? And even if you say, well, we're separate, you're actually not separate. So you'll have to, sooner or later, you'll have to fight it out with another group who are separate, but who hold opposite views to your own.
well, that's kind of what I was wanting to get into, is that, the dynamic balance. I mean, maybe people don't think about yin and yang, or good and bad, or evil. That evil may exist, but would you use that term evil? That maybe there is a battle between good and evil, or something?
I personally don't know. I haven't experienced external evil. I've had like nightmares. I thought, at one point, the devil maybe approached me, but it's not a proof of any external evil. In terms of, say, sin, the Buddha said that there is no sin, but there's ignorance. So that ignorance, and I think what he's again pointing to is that ignorance of how the world actually is. So it's not polar opposites. It's not good or evil or beautiful or ugly. It's more flowing. It's more interrelated. Right. And if you understand that, then it gives you more compassion. And also, in terms of, say, meditation, the deeper you go within yourself, I think if you're skillful, then you begin to realize that all of us have these deep mechanisms and deep issues. So it's like a computer software that we have roughly the same kind of software, but we have different inputs, so we get different output. But the basic challenges, to our relationship software, we have in common.
Right. That, which kind of brings me back to the question about where we get our power from, because I notice, just with myself, if I don't do meditation or any internal practices, I let the current affairs, anxiety get the best of me, so I think about fear. Our most primal wiring in our nervous system, is an aversion to fear, right? We don't want it. We run away, or we freeze, or we we self-destruct, basically. So I noticed that, in good times when, the world isn't the way it is, you still need to meditate, because we have these internal mechanisms that makes us human, that causes all kinds of dark, we have to work on our shadow self. But when times are the way they are, with an atmosphere of fear around, people, I think, need tools, or to relearn what it is that's going to help us transcend that. And I don't see, most systems of belief don't really address that. Yeah.
No, because the belief is rigid. And if, as the Buddha says, and I have experienced, life is always change, then there will always, but if a belief is rigid in the sense that you've invested in it, it becomes part of your identity. That's why people, protect what they believe. But what you believe is your choice. It's not universal truth. So again, you're bound to come into conflict with others, or you're bound to feel upset, whether it's anger or fear, because you want life to be this way, but now it's moving. Now the sands are shifting, or other people are coming and presumably taking over what you can do.
Yeah.
But I used to tell my daughters when they were young, and occasionally I still tell them now, that focus on not necessarily what you want, but what you need to do. What is right action at this present moment? So sometimes right action is what you want, so you have a win-win situation.
Right.
But sometimes it's not, so you have to distinguish, well, what do I need to do? What is my challenge? Because we actually only live in the moment. We only live now. We think a lot about the future. I mean, that's where fear comes in. But the future is a projection of the past.
Yeah.
So we go between past and future, and somehow we tend to neglect now. So if we focus on asking that question, what do I need to do now? And what you need to, from my point of view, what you need to do is not only what I want to do, but what's happening around me. What does the natural environment require? What does the political or cultural, what's happening in that environment, and how is that impacting me? So if I can somehow cut through all of that, which is what meditation, can allow you to do, and focus on what you actually need to do now.
Yes.
Do it, and then move on. So there's no need for fear or worry, because if you've done all that you can do, total action, right action, if you've done that, there's actually nothing else you can do.
Yeah, because you mentioned about being in the present, and from when I'm studying anxiety and the origins of it, we can either have a top-down anxiety where our cerebral cortex is, we have a memory of an event that, the once bitten twice shy kind of phenomenon that happens. We do what we can to prevent that same thing from occurring. So we spend a lot of energy preventing having that feeling. Or we have a bottom-up approach where, our hardcore, our reptilian wiring is determining, maybe on a visceral level, that we viscerally feel the fear. Like I remember when COVID first happened, we have to go to the grocery store, and you don't know what it is. It's the unknown, but we're told that it's a deadly disease. But some fear is good. Some anxiety is good because it can prevent us from repeating the same mistake, or prevent us from endangering ourselves. But how can we use that fear, in a sort of self-preservation kind of attitude?
Well, I think what you're talking about, like bottom up and top down, I think you're talking about different levels of consciousness, akin to different dantians in Qigong, or the different chakras in yoga. So they represent different faculties, human faculties that we've developed over time. So to have an integrated, healthy, balanced response, we all of our different levels have to be integrated. So if you're totally cerebral and you might suppress what's coming up, or on the other hand, you let your animal side take over. But it's all are part of us, and all are necessary.
Yeah.
So but they're all happening inside of you. So what, say, Vipassana or mindfulness meditation can do for you, if it's done skillfully, is that it can allow you to see these things coming up into consciousness, but also to understand that not everything that comes into consciousness is coming from the same level, right? So then you can balance things out. Then you can, some fear is healthy, like, you're not gonna, run across the 401 or something like that.
Yeah,
Right?
that's good.
So, but in terms of that, there is like self-preservation fear, and it's almost mechanical. You obviously don't do things that put you in physical danger. But on the other hand, you have to distinguish between that and psychological fear. So you're talking about bad experiences. So, you might have had a bad experience when you're a youngster or a child, and it has now caused you to act in a certain way.
Yeah.
But if you don't kind of, re-examine that, and those things often come up in your meditation, if you don't re-examine that, then you may be, as an adult, you may be acting according to decisions you made as a child, which are no longer appropriate. So all of those things need to come out in the wash, and the more we can see them, the more we can let go of them. Because in Vipassana, the Buddha says we suffer because we hold on. So if during the process of meditation we can let go of what is negative or no longer necessary, then we are lighter, then we don't carry so many burdens.
Right.
Then we can have greater clarity as we go through life.
Right. Yeah. So that kind of covers the experience, memory to some degree. But there's also this, what we learn through knowledge, through words, reading, information. That can also cause. Information is good, but it can also be destructive, because just one word, one idea can make you, if you don't adapt, or if you don't change with the times, and we are still holding on to an idea, that can be damaging. If we, and also if we have the wrong idea, then we could be acting in the moment with wrong information, through a sort of abstract expression, instead of acknowledging the more present wiring.
But it's still the simplicity of the Buddha's teaching is it's still, whether it's an idea, a belief, or a person, or, a special diet that you like or you don't like. It all comes down to nothing is wrong.
Yeah.
What the Buddha says, we suffer because we are attached. So if you have an idea, then other information comes up that it may no longer be accepted, or no longer be what we thought it was, or wrong information. Then we can let go of it. as simple as that. But so a lot of it comes down to knowing yourself, and knowing, in myself I feel it like compulsion, am I compelled to do something? If I feel that compulsion, that is a kind of holding on. And so that's like a red flag to me. What are you holding on to? Holding on,
Yeah.
You can act, but you don't have to act according to belief or holding on or to a system.
Right.
You can act in a moment to what you're actually being challenged by.
Yeah, that's always been a fascinating topic for me, because part of the anxiety is the self-doubt, right? Even for people who've trained martial arts, they don't, you know, when it's time to go in, they don't go in. When it's time to step back, they don't step back. We're just kind of frozen. And that's, you know, I think, you know, it kind of comes down, maybe Buddha would say, you know, that it's a practice in selfhood, right? Is that I love myself to some degree, that I don't want to get punched in the face, right? You know, that those animalistic kind of nature of fighting back, for instance, or preserving yourself is, you know, in one situation it would be sinful, in another situation is not. But I think people, if you take an abstract approach to your belief system or your perspective, that you know, if it's purely abstract, then you won't act when it's time to act, right? In an act of self-preservation. I guess that's kind of what I'm getting to, is that with the COVID lockdown, we're sort of, you know, a lot of people are afraid to go out of their house. They're afraid to do anything. And I think that's dangerous to society in a way, because doing something could be dangerous. Not doing something could be dangerous. So how do we know when it's time to act?
Well, in terms of COVID, then you know, we can't, you know, as with anything else in life, there are no guarantees. So we can't guarantee that we won't get it, even if we take precautions. But I think, you know, if we take precautions, which the medical experts recommend, and then it's a good chance, the probabilities are good that we won't get it.
Right.
Or even if we do get it, you know, we may not get it seriously, we may not die, but we may. So, but there's no way we can guarantee anything.
Yeah.
But then that's so. It's in terms of you can look at it in terms of your own fear, which, as I said, there's precaution. There are things that you can do, but then beyond that, then we get into worry, fear, anxiety, which is not it's not constructive. It doesn't do us any good.
Right. It
saps our energy.
Yeah.
You know. But the ridiculous thing is then when we turn this whole pandemic thing into, you know, a political thing, and we start arguing about freedom and rights and left and right, and that is actually shocking to me. But you know, I'm less and less. Well, not really shocking. I understand why. I understand why it's happening, but in these days, to see it so widespread is a bit disappointing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you know, you mentioned that different groups that we identify with may come, like in the United States right now. I mean, basically the country is divided in half. Maybe a sliver more to the Democratic side, but one of the things I've been rereading is Lao Tzu, and I brought the book Wen Tzu as well. They kind of, people think that Taoism, that you're sort of a recluse, you know, if you're followed the Taoism, that you're a recluse, you go to the mountains, you meditate, which sounds nice, but actually Lao Tzu was concerned about the people's relationship with the rulership, the people's place inside, and that he recommended, or whoever it was, recommended that you treat the people with respect. That if you make unruly laws or unjust laws, that people will start to rebel. They're gonna fight back.
I think, if I remember correctly, I think one of his lines was, "Govern a large state as you would cook a small fish, gently."
Gently. Yeah.
But again, coming down to the basics, it's like, if you're a politician, ask yourself, why are you a politician? Are you there for influence and money, or are you there to try to make things better? And if what you're doing is hurting people, then for me it makes no sense. But again, power is addictive.
Well, that's kind of one of the themes, and like Lao Tzu wants a sage to be in the rulership position, because he says if you change a leader every 4 years or however long, and they don't unify the people, that we're stuck in a kind of quagmire. We cannot express ourselves fully human, right, in a human way.
Well, I think that's because it doesn't make any sense in a way logically that in democratic societies that the pendulum swings this way or that way, and then when the next government comes in, they undo what the previous government have done. That doesn't make any sense. But again, I think it points to the people, and it points to, I think democracy is stronger when people are stronger, people are more just, people can discriminate. But I think we've lost a sense of quality, a sense of decency, morality, that your religion shouldn't make you angry or go after other people or be hateful, right? And so if you get back to the basics, we can if a ruler is doing a bad job, get rid of him or her.
Yeah.
If a ruler is doing a good job, it doesn't make sense to get rid of him or her merely because they've been in for 4 or 8 years or whatever. Right. It doesn't make any sense.
I feel like people are not asking the right questions. That's how I know when someone has experience in life that they're asking the right questions, because
I think to frame it in another way, I said the essential questions were change, the fact of change, and the fact of interconnection. Mm-hmm. But those can be seen also as spiritual questions, and how spirituality is different from religion. So popular religion, I think, at the top, or the most evolved tier of all major religious traditions, it's like going up to the mountain. If you can make it up to the mountain at the top, then they come together. But not all paths go to the top, and also at the bottom of the mountain. As I've been thinking recently, just imagine everyone wants to go to Everest. You can approach from the Indian side, Chinese side. You can go up in paths. You may meet dead ends. So not all paths lead to the top. But if we can, see how spirituality is different from popular religion, and for me, spirituality is about a personal journey, personal personal exploration, letting go, which is not easy, facing your fears, facing your dark side, and moving through that. Then, as I said before, then we can become lighter, we can carry less burden, and therefore, if we're not burdened by all these fears or emotions and preconceptions, then we can see more clearly what is the challenge in front of us, and then we can kind of more flow through life rather than stumbling and falling and bumping into each other.
Well, exactly. But do you feel like a certain amount of deprogramming needs to happen, to sort of get rid of our, strictly held beliefs?
Well, I think to say deprogramming kind of, to me, suggests something active.
Yeah.
And within my understanding and my own practice of Vipassana meditation, I have a blank slate. I just go and I sit, and it may be frustrating, it may be painful, but that, to me, that's what the Buddha said: be mindful of what is happening now. So what is happening now, it may not be pleasant, it may be pleasant, but may not be pleasant. But if you have that kind of openness, then eventually all of the things that need to be deprogrammed, all the shadows, all the darkness, all the pain, will eventually rise up. And when it rises up, then we do what we do when we are a novice beginner. We let go.
Let it go. Whew. Yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky because it's sometimes the shadows or the reflections of our soul can, they almost feel like the real thing, and unless you have a feeling of emptiness or a feeling of not having thoughts, then you don't know that you're having a thought. So
that's true, because in some of my meditation instruction, I advise people to look out for I thoughts. I thoughts are subtle thoughts. You may be looking and you see, busy mind or planning mind or whatever, but then who or what is looking at those thoughts? It's actually some thoughts that have now withdrawn themselves and become the meditator, and then those thoughts are not looked at. So you're correct in saying that it's easy to think that you're meditating, but you're actually thinking about meditating.
Right. It's a different kind of process, it seems, or the word I guess you've used before, awareness. It seems like that awareness, that quiet, abiding awareness, doesn't. As soon as you have a thought, a memory, emotion, that the awareness starts to escape you, almost. It's
what tends to happen is that the thought or the vision or the sound, or whatever comes up into your consciousness, I think we're at a profound level, we're kind of hardwired for that to then begin to associate. So, go back into memory, connect up with this, connect up with that, and then start to run. And as that process runs, then it creates a stronger and stronger sense of reality. But it's not something solid. It's just many things linking up. And that may be fine. I mean, that may lead to maybe a creative process, but often it's circuitous, and something like fear, it could build fear, but it's just those processes feeding each other and and going around like this and building momentum.
Yeah, and that takes that internal awareness to, that if you don't even know that we have an internal awareness, if you don't know to look for it, that's why I want to, talk to you about Buddhism.
Well, I think it's actually, I think we in our organization, we take it for granted that we are not our thoughts. But a lot of people would insist that they are their thoughts, they are their emotions, and therefore they cannot, create that space to see how those things are operating on them.
Right. Yeah, and I think, one of the ones that I've been working on since being learning with you is the identity part, because when I first started to meditate, I felt a loss of identity. It's disconcerting, to say the least, that if you realize your identity is wrapped up in your memory or who you are, your self-perception, that once you start to peel that off and see the deeper, deeper identity, then it's disconcerting, and on a philosophical level, it feels like, a lot of people have talked about this and about the universe being sort of unconcerned, right? It's a kind of universe that doesn't care if you come or go, or what happens.
Well, it's, in a way, I think in Hinduism, and I think all of the spiritual traditions, there are actually two faces of God. One in which the personal face, in which your identity and individuality and your life here matters. And then the other, as you said, is, it's almost eons, universes come and go.
It's
and but so we are, as in most spiritual traditions at the higher level, we are both and.
Yeah.
So we are individuals. We have this life. We have this body, but that's not everything.
Yeah.
Right. And so in a sense, it doesn't matter, but it does matter. As you were saying about Lao Tzu, talking about not only the personal practice, but also governments and complexity, etc.
Yeah, and on a personal basis, like our personal thing I call me, right? It's the least important thing, but it's also the most important thing, and that's kind of these paradoxes that exist. They're hard for people to get their head around. It can cause depression because the universe doesn't care about me. But at the same time, everything I do is so important. It's really it's hard to travel if you don't have
but I think you can solve the dilemma by accepting change, which is what the Buddha recommended. Like if you accept the fact of change, if you truly accept it, most of your problems disappear. Right? So,
Right.
it doesn't make you happy and make all the bad things go away, but the bad things are not so bad, and actually part of what makes a bad thing bad is you put a label on it.
Oh yeah, exactly. And then every time that stimulus comes, it irritates that nerve, right? And that kind of line makes me think about so getting into it, the sort of the autonomy of who is changing, the sort of agency that we kind of take on as having we have some ego. It's me that is changing to some degree. So I think people need to know how is it that they can take sort of responsibility, because I know through martial arts, that's a big part of the training is discipline, training yourself, because it doesn't come naturally. And so one of the lines of questioning I wanted to get into was, the path of least resistance. Because Tai Chi, we see, most people have a concept of it that it's, it looks very fluid and relaxing, and which it should be. But it's actually very hard to be fluid and relaxed. And so I think people with their training that I can edit this part. That it's someone has to take responsibility. I have to take responsibility for change, for being relaxed, for being integral and being united. There's a sort of it doesn't happen laissez-faire. You know, you have to work at it.
Yeah, you have to work at my Tai Chi teacher, Miss Lee, used to talk about Kung Fu. Kung Fu is merit, something that you develop over time. And she used to say it's like building a bank account. In the beginning, you put your pennies into the bank, which at that time you can't afford to spend.
Yeah.
But if you build a bank account later on, then you can afford to spend some of the things that you've been saving. Or another way of thinking of it is like in Tai Chi. No, I was saying about Tai Chi. In Tai Chi, in the beginning, you do Tai Chi. You work hard at doing Tai Chi, but later on, when you attain mastery, then it becomes effortless. Tai Chi does you, and even though you're doing all of these complex moves and breathing and posture, hands and feet, it's effortless, right? So, and it's also not only effortless, but there's more space, there's more emptiness within you. So within yin and yang, within Tai Chi, there's still Wuji. Wuji is always there, which is the spaciousness and the emptiness. And that's something that actually, another way of looking at fear, etc., is that emptiness is actually what you've talked about before, which is the part of the universe that doesn't care. So that is always there, and you can. It's always accessible, and you can drop into that, and in a way that will look after you, that will support you, because it doesn't need anything. But a lot of us are afraid of emptiness. That's why we fill our lives with activity and stimulation, etc., because we don't want to. Because that not doing is such a strange thing in our current lifestyle.
That's right. Yeah, and I just find it, I think, to talk about these things, even the yin-yang symbol, and you're getting into it with the Wuji, that people sort of, I think, or I'd like people to re-look at the Taoist principles, because it seems it's a non-denominational undertaking, to be a Taoist. I mean, there's, the religious, devotional type of Taoism, but the kind of Taoism that I think that you've been training us under, it's a very experiential, and
it's experiential, and it's also universal. It is about movement. It's about life. It's about breathing in, breathing out, and apparently some freeze frame photos of the planet shows the clouds and the weather. It moves like that. It kind of breathes in and breathes out, and so there are many universal principles, and on the fact of change. Everything is, what in life, if you ask yourself, we resist change so much, but what in life has ever not changed?
So, I think, we've talked a bit about Taoist philosophy, but I the more I study Buddhism or practice it, that it's about being realistic, about having the worldview. And I think a lot of people are going acting their whole life through without having a worldview that's realistic. So I'm just so other than meditation must be the main. That's what Buddha said. That's the main practice, is to following the principles that someone else has written out. So there's a kind of fake it till you make it kind of recommendation in Taoism, Buddhism, because we, like we were talking about, we don't, we're not innately equipped with handling the balance of yin yang or understanding Wuji or the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path. We don't necessarily have that inside of us. We have to sort of follow the rules a little bit until you get to a point where you can, you're acting sort of a Wu way, acting without acting. Is that, would you say something like that?
Yep.
Okay. Cut. No, but what other things can people do? Because can we, other than sitting meditation, a lot of people are not doing that.
Well, it's about your life, right? It's also like life is not only you. It's everything around you. It's the natural environment. It's the political, cultural environment. So because day to day, outside of your meditation practice, you have to respond to these forces, right? So it's just like if you have a storm or windstorm or snowstorm, you have to respond to it. The same thing if you have a political or a cultural storm, you have to respond to it. And so the more equipped you are, the better you can be. I know that I know that there are people who are so-called, spiritual seekers. They don't pay attention to politics because they see it as something maybe beneath them, not spiritual.
Right.
But in fact, everything is interconnected. That's what we have to that's what we have to recognize. Everything is interconnected. So, for instance, it's good, in the physical environment to know, when the storm is coming. It's good so you can be prepared.
Right.
It's good to know, what your government is doing, what they're doing with your taxes, or, if there's a growing poverty gap, or how you're going to deal with the millions of people that are probably going to be pouring across your borders in the next decade or so. So all of those things are coming. Also, things like robotics, genetics, a lot of scientific developments that are coming. And at the moment, we don't have any way, apart from the profit motive, we don't have any way of judging what the deeper impact on humanity will be. So all of these things are very relevant.
Yeah, no, for sure, and that's why I'm here speaking with you, because the problems are exponentially getting more complex, and the solutions are getting more complex, and so. At some point, we're going to have to simplify.
That's right.
And
so Krishnamurti, who's I admire his teachings and writings a lot. Indian teacher who's now passed. I remember a passage from one of his books is that complexity cannot be solved by more complexity, but only by simplicity. And so for me, then that simplicity comes from within. So if you're simple within, then you can handle complexity, and so you can. And how can you do that? By having clarity, and by being in the moment. If you're in the moment, you can only do one thing at a time, right? And then so that cuts through like a knife, cuts through the complexity.
Yeah, no, for sure. And as I go about my day-to-day life, I see people. Most people are quite, they're straightforward. They just want to live their life, be safe, comfortable. They don't want to get into other people's business. but I think as the atmosphere, changes, that it brings anxiety and a sense of powerlessness. And if they don't have an internal life, that if there was a bad ruler, and that he wanted to bring the world to suit his image or her image, then we would probably, if we don't have a sense of power, that we would just go along with whatever, there's adaptation to whatever happens, but then there's a point where that sense of self is compromised.
Well, it's doing what is right. It's the right action. And so, for instance, you hear people saying, "Oh, all politicians are the same." No, they're not. And the way to find out is by paying attention. And so if you pay attention to a politician, you can tell whether they're lying or not, because you can see what they've done or said over time. Also, the more you know yourself, the more you know other people on a personal level. So you can, if you pay attention again to someone, you can see, maybe this person is just emotionally stunted. Maybe they're a narcissist. Maybe they're a con man or a con woman. And it is possible, by paying attention, it's possible to, not having inside information or anything, you can see directly, which is what Vipassana means. Vipassana means to see clearly, directly, through, around, so completely that you react choicelessly, that you see what needs to be done, and you do it. Right. But that comes from a place of deep clarity. It's not bigotry. It's not I act this way because I believe this way, and it's not knee-jerk. Yeah. It's actually because someone who comes from that place may have certainty. It may seem on the surface that like almost like overconfidence, or it may seem like bigotry. But there's a big difference, and we can begin to tell the difference. We can begin to develop a sense of quality. I think we've lost a sense of quality, things that are innately valuable. So we're now living in a world of quantity. How much money, how big, how small. How are you better than the next person, or this, that.
Well, yeah. No, for sure, and it's it's almost like if the human race is on a boat, we don't have someone at the rudder, right? We're sort of adrift a little bit, and I just wonder, that I just want people to realize that they can have a spirit life without having to have a set of beliefs that.
Yeah, well, which is why this is the conversation that you've initiated is valuable, because it's the more we can bring these things into the popular consciousness, then the more it expands our options, or it may bring a little bit more clarity into our lives, a little bit more compassion. So to solve a lot of I've written for a long time, to solve a lot of our collective problems, we don't need all to be totally enlightened like the Buddha, but a little bit of enlightenment
would be nice.
For a lot of people will take us all a long way.
No, that's right. I remember, I think it was when I first joined the school, that you had writing about water conservation or appreciation, and probably before it was hip. I mean, before the sort of ecological movement has taken off, that you've probably been talking about that way before, and just being concerned about that. And that's why I wanted to talk to you. And other reasons is that and let people know that there are solutions. It's not it's not an end game that the world is toast. Yeah, that it's not a foregone conclusion, right? That we gotta take the vaccine. We gotta stay home.
We can it sounds trite, but actually we can overcome if we act together. But some religious leaders say that, some politicians say that, but the crucial question is how can we come together, and more to the point, what is keeping us apart? And so, which will now take us back to the individual level about what we've talked about, ideas and beliefs, on our attachment to them and our identification with, maybe this religion or that party. Those are the things which actually are keeping us apart. And coming back again to the Buddha, the Buddha said we suffer because we're attached. Well, that's attachment. That's holding on. We can't change. We can't change by holding on.
Thank you, Shifu James. I appreciate that. I mean, we can continue the conversation. I mean, another book I've been rereading is The Art of War by Sun Tzu. I mean, it feels like we're in a military environment, and it's not in Canada. We got it pretty good, but
I think what has happened is the right, the Republican Party, has for a few decades been deliberately taking power, because the demographics, and there are articles that have been written about this recently, that the demographics show that, say, in the United States, that brown or black people in time will outnumber white people. So white people are losing their privilege and their power. And so it seems harsh to say that, but in a way you can look at it, it's almost like Civil War karma. Civil War karma has not been dealt with as yet, and those issues are still coming up.
Right.
And also another element that's one element that has gravitated to the Republican Party. The other element, which is part of their base, is the keeping women in their place, and not allowing women to have the same rights as men. And so those two things, which is in a way again other examples of resistance to change, but visceral, very deep. That's what's driving it, and they actually have the Republicans have lost the majority vote for several elections, but they cling to power.
Yeah.
And they, because the way things are set up, it favors them, and they're not going to let go of that easily. Yeah. But that is corrosive, because that is undermining people's rights, and it's undermining people's trust in democracy.
Yeah, and it seems the extremes, and coming back to the Tai Chi symbol, that extremes seem to grab power. So extreme left, extreme right, it becomes a kind of totalitarianism that most of us, we want to be in the gray zone. We're happy, but there's some that are extreme, and that's how they get votes. That's how they But
and a lot of that is amplified by technology, social media, etc. Right? So you couldn't have something in the old days. You couldn't have something go viral overnight or within hours. But now we can do it, and positive things, but often negative things as well.
No, for sure, and that's being it's weaponized. It seems like if we talk about the body politic, it's all these externals, social media, mainstream media, everything is weaponized. Sitcoms are weaponized, almost everything. And it's hard for people. That's part of why, I wanted to come see you, is that, there's a trust. There's a trust in our structures, our systems, that we have to have trust, or the social contract sort of breaks down. It's brother against brother, and and that's what I don't want, and I can kind of see it happening. So
we need, appealing to the lowest common denominator is easy, but it's very destructive. And once you start eroding it, it's very difficult to build it back up again. So we live in, we have an opportunity. I think even COVID is an opportunity to reconsider our lifestyles, reconsider, how we live personally, how we deal with, being alone or being together. Maybe how we design our cities, all kinds of stuff, right? And what kind of power systems we use. We can use this. This is like a little bit of a break, and we can use it constructively to say, hey, you know what? We don't have to go back to the old. We can take this opportunity to make more, smarter decisions. Right?
Yeah, I definitely see that too. It's not all negative, and I wonder, if some conspiracy theories, are saying, if there is a global elite that want to take over. I mean, some of their ideas maybe, this global reset. Maybe we need a global reset.
Well, the global, the elite. The Republicans talk about the elite. The elite are not educated people who live on the coast. The elite are the rich and the corporations. And what's standard Republican policy? Tax cuts for the rich. Tax cuts for the rich and corporation, right? So that's where the gap is coming from. So Wall Street is not Main Street. But they sell the health of a nation as how the stock market is doing. But most people, can't afford to invest in stocks, right?
Well, that's it. And I'm glad you're bringing that up, because you're particularly, qualified to talk about that. You have a history in economics or accounting. At least you understand how things work or should work, and that it can be confusing for people too. That if we think about, you've kind of used that analogy that money is like energy, that you can accumulate it, you can spend it, but but we all have to sort of pay our share into the main body, so that we're not usurping the whole entire thing.
The American form, the historical American form of capitalism, is that every man for himself.
Yes, the rugged individual.
Yeah, and so if someone else is suffering, it's not my fault. And if I'm okay, then I'm okay. You should look out for yourself, which is that's actually a fact in terms of the fabric of American history.
No, that is. I think we're butting up against this kind of history of capitalist, me first, America first. But it's kind of. But we also have on the democratic side, liberal side, that we have all these free trade agreements that it still ends up the poor stay poor, the rich get rich. It's almost we're not policing this.
Yeah, because the free trade agreements don't have teeth, right?
Yeah.
So they don't require each country to say look after pollution, look after human rights, but we can't do that unless we have the collective will, and Trump has deliberately eroded people's trust or willingness to cooperate, and so it's going to be more difficult now.
Right. the trust has to be rebuilt to some degree, and hopefully this is a wake up call, right? This year,
hopefully
2020.
the pandemic, because the experts are saying actually this isn't the last. There'll be more, and so we should learn some lessons.
Right, and learn tools to at least keep, if a whole section of society is losing their minds, and I think that's a big issue right now is mental illness, that we can keep ours, you can, at least as an individual, no matter...
The thing is that people, speaking for myself and speaking for people I know who have meditated for a while, they've coped with the pandemic relatively well because they already have those tools. They can be by themselves. They can go within, to check out what's happening. And they've done pretty well. There's people who have that kind of spiritual practice.
Yeah, no, I'm grateful that when everything is shut down, you still have, we have to do something. We wake up in the morning, we have to spend some energy. Even if you laze around all day, that takes energy, it takes planning. So, but why not spend energy on going internal? I was grateful to be able to practice Tai Chi or any of the martial arts forms or anything. It's helpful to have a practice that's just about you. It's about your relationship with yourself, and if we don't have that, we're prone to ideological influence, whether for good or for worse. But and just on the mental illness, I heard a quote that mental illness is kind of like if everybody's jumping off a cliff, the people we call mentally ill are the ones that are running the other way. In a way, it's maybe society hasn't broken down that far, but in a way, there's some people that are very sensitive. They're born sensitive, and they can't handle a world of pretense, and so they either they break down or they try to hide away. They can't engage in society. I think that's part of the suffering that that Buddha wanted to relieve. I think that's got to be a major one. That the condition that we're in now has always existed. That's one of the things I'm realizing.
Well, all of the things that people feel arising from the pandemic, they were there before, but maybe they were there in smaller doses. But the basic mechanisms have always been there, and that the mechanisms in people's lives, your life may be going well for a decade or two, and then something breaks down. Then it's the same thing. Then you come down to the stress syndrome, when things break down, things fall apart. So these are mechanisms that people experience in their daily lives, but now we're all experiencing them together at the same time, which kind of
amplifies,
accelerates, accelerates.
No, thank you again.
Take one moment at a time.